Yeah, so I guess reading the game, maybe not so much. I'm going to talk more about the eye sequence, which I think is really important to be able to read the game. Because really, if you're not looking at the right things at the right time, you're not going to be collecting as much information, and then it's just going to be hard to know what's happening. And then I think it can be a little bit used for beach and indoor as well. So yeah, pretty much the eye sequence that I teach, and I think kind of gives you the most information. Also, everyone that I've worked with that does it feels like it slows down the game. And I think what happens with that is it just feels like you're collecting a lot of information, and then it makes it easier to read. So it feels like it slows everything down instead of feeling rushed. So the big thing, I guess, we talk about here. So if the team on the other side is attacking, I'll just run through it. So if I'm the server, obviously I'm going to be watching my serve to start with. Pretty much everyone else on the court is just going to be watching the passes on the other side. Shouldn't really be watching the ball at all. Shouldn't be watching the server. So the ball's going. Similar thing, once it kind of gets to the net, if I'm the server, that's when I'm going to stop looking at the ball, and I'm just going to be looking at the passer. So the biggest thing in the first move is I want to be watching the passer, but I actually want to be watching their platform, because that's going to give me the biggest cues on where that pass is going to go before they actually make the pass. So I can see the angles right there of where his platform is, where it's facing, and before it's even hit his hands, I've got a general idea of where that ball is going to be going. So that's the first thing I'm going to be looking at, is just his platform. The other thing you'll hear me say a few times is a soft gaze, I call it. So when I'm looking at something, even though I'm looking at his platform, I don't want to be super focused on it, because if I get too focused on that, then it shuts everything off around, and it's hard to take in that information. So a soft gaze at it. So I'm staring at his platform, trying to click that information, but I'm still going to see that ball coming in into that zone. So I get that feeling for that. I'll also be able to still see out of the corner of my eye what this player is doing, or, the other players on the court and indoor. So I'm not really looking at any one of them, but they're in my vision. I've got that soft gaze on that platform. So the platform, the passer, the ball goes up. And I want to be from his platform, I want to be watching that ball all the way up until just before the peak. In that motion, so it's traveled probably, 2.5 meters. I'm trying to get back into meters and not feet. At that stage there, in that area, I should by then know where the ball is going to end up. I shouldn't have to watch the ball anymore after that point. So that first 2 meters, 2.5, I should have all the information I need. I saw the platform. I saw the direction it went off, the speed, the spin. I know what's happening with the wind. I have a really good idea where that ball is going to end up. From there, I would have a quick peek and just a really quick peek at what my hitter's doing. So I can see he's setting up to come out of the middle. So from there, I know roundabout where he's going to attack. Indoor, you probably wouldn't do that so much. You probably wouldn't look at the attacker who you're blocking, because it's a lot faster normally, and then you won't be able to come back. So really, beach, you do it a quick peek, but it's not super important. And then from there, I'm not watching the ball, I'm actually watching this player, so the setter. And from there, I'm picking up all the information I need. I can see if they're coming in, if they're going to attack on 2, or on indoor, you're watching their hands. If they start going for the tip over, making that move. Also, by not watching the ball and watching that setter, I'm picking up all that information on where it's coming into their hands, on what angle. So, if it's going to be lower down, you can kind of see if it's going to come out shooter faster, or a little bit behind the head and it's going to go back. Obviously, really good setters get into that neutral position all the time, which makes them really good. But, players can give you those little cues. So it's all about collecting all that information as much as you can. So that's giving me my information. Then from out of the setter's hands, I'm watching that ball. So going up, it's kind of going off my screen here, but going up similar to that point. So getting to the peak of where the ball's gone. And so again, similar to off the pass, that's given me all my information I need, from seeing how fast it's come off their hands to the trajectory, I should know where it's going to end up. From there, I want to be having my eyes on my attacker. I know who the set's gone to now. In indoor or with beach, we already know there's only one player. So now I'm watching that person come in, and that they're giving me the cues on what they're doing with their approach. If they're getting underneath the ball, is it too inside? Is it over the head? All those kind of cues. I'm watching their approach come in. And again, I'm not actually going to go back to the ball at all. From there, when he gets down to the bottom of his jump, I should have a really good idea with that information. I always talk about it as a window. So I want to picture this window that's going to be up around here. And that's going to be the point where he's going to meet the ball for the attack. And really important on this window again is having that soft gaze. So I don't want to be super focused in on his shoulder. I don't want to be super focused in on the ball. Because what happens there, if I'm too focused in on the ball, yeah, his arm's going to come whipping through and your brain just can't register it. If I focus too much on his shoulder, I'm going to get some cues from him, but then again, I'm not really going to catch the ball and then suddenly it's gone. It's just too quick. So picturing that window and having that soft gaze, your eyes actually, you still pick up that information in the last second with their arms and the balls meeting together, and it almost feels like it slows it down. You can actually see the hand contact the ball, and that's obviously going to give you those last reads on where it's actually going for that swing. So obviously a lot there to go through, but kind of me and Sean were talking about in the that little break there. So really important. It's kind of one of those skills. Yeah, I always talk about it. It's like the approach in volleyball. You know, when we all started learning it, it was a struggle because we were thinking about left, right, step close, jumping, and it just felt awkward. Until now, if someone told me to do approach, I wouldn't even think about it. It would just be like breathing. I'd just do it, you know. And so this is one of those skills that is going to be pretty tough in the beginning, but I think it's really important. And you probably asked me what age, and I probably wouldn't be able to say exactly what age, but once they have the fundamentals under control, so they can pass, they can set, they can swing a little bit, I think this is definitely something we should be teaching our kids. I think soccer was really big at it, working on the eye sequence at young ages, and it just makes their vision so they can see what's going on. They see the gaps. They can make those passes. It just makes you understand the game and be able to read the game a lot easier. So we can always talk about, yeah, where he's going to go if he gets under the ball, the sets over his head, you know, all that kind of stuff. But until they can understand the eye sequence and what they need to be looking at, it's going to be hard for them to see that stuff. So I think what happens a lot is, yeah, it just feels like either you're trying to catch up with the ball and you're chasing it and everything's just too fast, or you're focusing too much on one thing and then it's gone. So I think really important to kind of go through that eye sequence to kind of get it down as good as possible. It can be a tricky thing to teach sometimes. The best way I find to do it, if you can start with video, because then you can easily break it down, kind of what I just did then. So, and I was actually doing this today with Alani, so which was quite good. So pretty much what I'd do is I'd have him in front of the video, and then we would talk it through. So I would say, okay, so this point, oh, stop there. Okay, so this point here, we're watching the ball, and just talk it through like that. Okay, now we're transferring to the platform. And then from there, I'll tell them, okay, now you're watching the ball. Now take your quick peek at the hitter. Now we're watching the setter. Watching the setter. Now we're watching the ball up to the peak. Now we want to be watching the attacker. Okay. This point, picture where that window is, where the window is here. And then they make that swing. And I'd go through with that with him a bunch of times until he starts feeling kind of comfortable with it. I'll go back a little bit. So that's how I would start with it. And then we would try to run it through more live. So I'd talk it through, which even now it's one of those things when you're talking it through is really hard. Even I sometimes mess it up. But I think it's that learning curve when, if you can say it, and it's going to be hard because you got to say more words than what's kind of happening. Then that helps kind of go when you start to only have to watch it. So I would say to him, so ball, passer, ball, hitter, setter, ball, hitter, window, like that. And we'll go through that a bunch of times. So then while I'm saying it, hopefully his eyes are going to those points. And so we'd go through that a bunch of times. And then once he's feeling comfortable, then I would get him to say it. And we'll go through that with a bunch of video. And he'll go through ball, passer, ball, hitter, setter, ball, hitter, window. And we'll go through that. And he would say it a bunch of times. And I'd try to be listening and try and correct him and be like, oh, did you think was there one you missed there? Or we'll go back until he gets rhythm. Then from there, I'd take him out onto the beach volleyball court. And then same thing, I'd have someone attacking and I would say it to him behind his head so he could hear it and he could just look at those points and try and make a dig on it. And I'd get the person probably just to hit angle at them. And then I'd get them to say it while they're still trying to make the dig, which can be obviously super frustrating and hard as well, which is something good for them to work through. And then from there, you let them to just try and do it without saying it and just using the eyes. So those are the steps I would do to try and build that vision up. And it is something, with everything, repeating it as many times as you can. But yeah, I feel like if you can get that vision down, get that eye sequence down, it really slows the game down and helps you collect as much information as possible. Yeah.
Really, really intrigued by the concept of reading the game. I think my background with hockey, the players who have an advantage can see the future, can see maybe 3 or 4 phases ahead of the game, and therefore they don't end up in the right place at the right time. They know where the ball's going to be before it even gets there. And I love that you talk about what players see, because if we think about how a player moves, a player has to interpret what they see and hear in the environment. So there's a whole lot of stimulus that they have to interpret. Then they have to make a decision based on the information that they're receiving before they move. And so the better we can get at looking at stuff, the better we are going to be at making decisions, and the better we are effectively at moving. And my challenge, I suppose, to coaches on the call is to be able to, are we coaching how we're interpreting information? We know that if there's 3 things when it comes to moving, if there's interpreting information, making a decision, and executing the skill or the movement, quite often we focus on the execution of the skill and the movement, not on a little bit on the decision and what choices we make, but rarely do we talk about what we're interpreting, what we're seeing.
Jason, it's Tracy here. Hey, just wondering, mate, if the eye sequence for reading the play as a blocker is the same or similar as it would be for a passer or a digger.
Yeah, so no, definitely the same. Probably the biggest thing is, as a defender, it's going to be just your eyes making those movements, but as a blocker, you will have to move your head a little bit to make those. And I think making that distinguished difference, so to make sure the players don't, when they're in the backcourt, moving their heads around, because then it'll actually like mess up their hand-eye coordination, I guess.
Nice. Tyler, you have your hand up. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah. Hey, Jason. So for the last 3, like that ball attacker window, for the attacker, like, is it a glance, or are you teaching that kind of gaze jump as they're jumping as well? And would you teach that to younger athletes as well?
Yeah, I think the earlier we can teach it, obviously the better, because then they master it quicker. And it's kind of like, if you're the defender, you're not having to worry about that jump. But if you're the blocker, it's definitely as they're coming in for the approach. So as they're going into that step close, then that's when you'd be going back to that window and picturing that spot and making that. And it's a really big skill, like I talked about, where the ball travels for that first 2.5 meters and understanding where the ball's going to end up. And I think that's something that to teach the kids that. So it could be the way you kind of do that is have someone come in and set the ball, and once it reaches their peak, they have to close their eyes and then they have to say where they think it ended up. Is one way you can kind of teach it. The other one that I kind of use, which can be kind of fun, is and it's kind of used for your approach on your attack. So you're the attacker and your partner's going to set you as the ball reaches its peak. You got to close your eyes and then come in with your 3-step approach and have your hand out in front and see if the ball will land right on your arm. Because if you know where the ball's going, you should be able to move to that spot, which can be kind of fun for kids because it lands on their heads and they kind of joke around with it. Also fun for the high performance players as well. But yeah, I think learning that understanding of where that ball's going to end up, then that helps with being able to watch that attacker do their approach a little bit longer. And then once just before they step close, then you're going back. Awesome.
Nice. It's a question from me, Jason. So I'm quite intrigued how you can read both sides of the court, how you might read what an opposition is going to do, but also how do you improve potentially reading your own teammates and how you might coach that.
So you're talking about are you talking about defending against your own teammates, or are you talking about when you're playing with your teammate, what movements they're doing?
Yeah, playing in terms of your attacking.
Yeah. Oh, my teammate is attacking me and my teammate.
Yep.
Yeah. I think so. If my partner's attacking, I think really important thing is, obviously in beach, you have to make a call to see where the other person is going. So you're going to set the ball, take a little step off the net, and then look at the other side and make that call, cut or over line. With that information that you're seeing, you should be able to see what they're doing on their defense as well. So if they're doing a lot of like holding in your middle, or if they're setting up over in the angle early, I think that's something, the information you collect, and then help your partner to tell them, hey, like they're just sitting in your middle and just holding there. If you just play a good cut shot, or that's going to take them out of it, or they might be in the sharp, playing that over lines really open, that kind of information. Is that kind of what you were asking in the question, or?
Kind of, yeah. I just wanted to pick your brain around
the
differences, because we can read, and it may be different between indoor and beach, and I'd be happy to hear from anyone else on the call, just that.
I think, probably the other thing I thought the way that you're going with it was more on defense. Probably the one thing I would say is a big thing, like when you're going through that sequence, is if I'm the backcourt defender, obviously I can see the whole picture. My blocker can't see what I'm doing. So the blocker has to really trust that they're going to make their moves and make their read, and you have your calls and you've got to take those zones, and sometimes you go away from that. And then as a backcourt defender, I know what my blocker is meant to be doing. I see what's unfolding in front of me, and then I can make my moves on there. And sometimes, because you can see that picture in front of you, maybe my blocker is meant to be blocking line, but I can see they're set up too far in the seam or too much in the angle. So I know that's open and the set's gone wide, then I might be, sliding in there. I think those are, things like you can, when you're looking that way, if you have that soft gaze, you're not going to be staring at your partner, but you're going to see their movements and they understand where they're lined up. And then that's information I can pass to them and be like, hey, you're way too early on that dive block. And that's why they saw it. Or it could be, hey, no, that was my bad. I moved real early. Because that's a big thing too. As a blocker, I don't know if my defender ran too early. And then I'm like, damn, I jumped too early. That's why they did a cut shot. So I think that communication is pretty big.
Again, really, really insightful, and really, there's a lot to take in. There's so much, and what intrigues me is the concept of, like, I call it like perceive, act, decide. So like perceive, I mentioned it before. So like perceiving information from the environment, then I've got to make a decision based on what I'm picking up from the environment, and then I've got to act on it. And that is all happening at like 1,000,000 miles an hour in volleyball, and probably more so in indoor because there's more people, but it's just happening. And so I'm keen to, like, how do you help with it? It's full on. How do you help with it? Can you help to simplify it?
I mean, I think it's just one of those things like with that I sequence, if you teach it at a younger age and they get it there, then they're going to have way more reps with it for longer. And then it's kind of like collecting that information in your head like a library. The more you see volleyball and you see that happening, all those situations, you're running through them in your head, and well, you're not running through them in your head, but they just almost like instantly pop in. Like my brain's like, I've seen this before, I know exactly what he's doing. Boom, you're there. I don't know, I kind of think of it like what was that, the book, the In a Game, I think it might have been,
In a Game of Tennis.
Table tennis player.
Yep.
Yeah, and he was like, he just happened to grow up as a kid where he was on a table tennis court that had no space behind it. It might be a different one.
It might be, yeah. You're talking about the one where he played against the wall. Is that the guy?
He played against kids, but yeah, he had no space to stand back further, so he had to stand right at the court. And so growing up, all he saw was just like quick fire and people, and that's how he had like crazy reactions. So it's kind of just being put in that environment as many times as you can, and just getting more used to it, I think, is the biggest thing. It's hard to, it's just the learning curve. You know, we all want to jump straight to the glory at the end, but we all got to go through the learning curve with everything. Yeah,
and learning is messy, hey, and like it's difficult.
Yeah,
and we've got to be okay with it being messy, and that it's going to take time. So even as coaches, we've got to be really patient about, like, I thought they had it, but it's next week, and they don't have it. So how did, like, in terms of like retaining information, do you have any tips or anything around like how someone might retain information, or how someone might transfer something from the training ground, court, beach into a game? So yeah, how do you retain, and how do you then transfer that into a game?
I think like the biggest thing is like when I kind of spoke about on the passing on with the coaching, if they have that understanding and the feeling of what they're doing, the understanding of the technique and the feeling of it, then that's going to help them take it to wherever they want. If they don't have that, but they just do it a few times because you've told them, that's going to be harder for them to take it. And then it's just kind of what we talked about with those training blocks. So you're going through that sequence, working through the technical stuff, and then you add in a new element that's closer to the game. So whether I'm doing the chest passes, okay, then I go to a down ball serve, and then I go back to a float serve, then I go back to a player floating on you, so it's kind of going through those steps. I think is really important too, because so that you don't jump too quickly ahead, and then it kind of discourages them because they're not going to be good at it.
Don't feel effective.
Go through that kind of like almost achievements at each step, that confidence building up, and then that understanding of how it's going to feel when they get into the real game.
Thank you for the group for your attendance, and anyone who's watching the recording. It is awesome. Your contributions in breakout rooms, and those who chimed in with questions. Thank you to Brittany for your support, development of coaches in the Tamariki room. Jason, your time, your knowledge and experience is invaluable, so thank you, and coaches certainly get a lot out of that. The main thing for me, for everyone, is that it's really easy to gather public information. You can jump online, come on a webinar like so, and on its own, gathering information isn't sufficient to maximize your learning. So what you do next with what you've picked up today from Jason and from others is the most important part. So I challenge you, apply some of the information you've picked up this evening, have further conversations about it with yourself or with others. There are a number of influential people on this call who might be kind of from your region. So reconnect with coaches and see if they've applied some of the knowledge, and if they're starting to make some sense of things, make a stronger connection with the learning. It will be awesome. I'll close us off with a karakia, and then wish everyone a wonderful summer and festive season. So karakia whakamutanga. Kua mutu a mātou mahi o tēnei pō, mana kitia mai mātou katoa, o mātou hoa, o mātou whānau, kia aio te whenua, kia aio te moana, which translate to our work is finished for this time tonight. Bless us all, our colleagues, our families. Let the land be tranquil, let the sea be calm. And as mentioned, have a wonderful summer, a wonderful festive season, and I look forward to engaging with some of you in the future.